podcast of Wednesday's Child. This is where we get together with fabulous guests, give you a bit more insight and understanding about all aspects of eating disorders. I'm really, really pleased to say that today I am joined by the wonderful Sharon Johnson, and she is going to share with us her story as a parent. She had never encountered anything around eating disorders before, and then found herself as a mother having to contend with what so many of you in the community know can be an absolute just nightmare for a family. So without further ado, Sharon, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you for asking me. I'm very pleased to be here.
Oh, well, no, it's really lovely to chat to you. As I said there, eating disorders wasn't on your radar, was it? It wasn't something that you'd historically known a great deal about, either through friends or family. Was it a complete bolt out of the blue when this arose as an issue for your daughter?
Yeah, we were a normal family. We just had get-togethers. Yeah, we all love food and never really sort of saw it coming. So yeah, it was a complete not surprise, because it's a gradual things, and intuition takes over and you start thinking, oh, what's going on here? Missing meals, this sort of thing. So it's a mum instinct. It came as, but it took a while.
And how old was your daughter? And are we naming your daughter, or would you rather not?
I think for her at the moment, because we're only sort of early 15 months into recovery, I think we'll just keep her under the radar. But she was 26, so she was old for, to be not old in the community, but she was older for, you think this is going to happen to her, but
Yeah.
obviously now.
So as we say all the time in the Wednesday's Child community, it really is any age, any stage, any gender, any life circumstance. But I suppose as a parent, that then comes as even more of a shock, because by this time your daughter was already a working woman. She was, mature and capable, and all of a sudden she's contending with an eating disorder.
Yeah, and because it was very gradual, and we were on the onset of COVID as well, you kind of got lost with all the politics of the COVID. And also she was at a point in her life where she was very comfortable in a job she was doing, and then we were going, well, if you want to move on, you're heading towards a big number, you need to be making some lifestyle changes. So she looked into it, and she was going to do her last year to get her teaching qualification. She was already qualified, but she wanted to be a teacher. So, it was kind of for her, okay, well, we need to move her out of her comfort zone, and come on, let's do. And then so she was contending with COVID, and also doing her last teaching qualification at home as well, with not having that social interaction, because she should have been in London having the time of her life.
Oh, yeah, as so many people, it became such a weird, I mean, even looking back on it now, it seems unbelievable that we went through what we did. But there's no doubt that eating disorders, I think the whole narrative around eating disorders escalated on the main, because so many more people were encountering it for one reason or another. And it could be that in circumstances outside of COVID, perhaps your family might not have seen things up close and personal in the way you did. So what were the first signs that you started to recognise?
Missing meals. I was too busy to eat, I'm studying. Or I need to go out for a walk. And it wasn't just like a couple of, once a day. It was kind of two times a day. And then it'll be like, we'd be sort of, okay, so she's been out once, and then suddenly it'd be like, oh, I've got to go again for my mental health. And you're kind of like, okay, so you leave it, you think, okay, she's up, she's on her own, she just needs to get out, because we live in the country. And but then it was just, then suddenly we were cooking meals. Oh no, I don't fancy that tonight. Or oh, so it was a very gradual, but there were signs there from quite an early time that she was missing meals.
So when do you reach that conclusion as a parent that this is now more than me just being a little bit, I don't know, a bit of a worry war? Oh goodness, she's missed a meal. When do you start talking to your husband about it, having those broader conversations, thinking I'm going to have to start Googling, eating disorders, illness? When does it become that kind of entrenched in your brain that you feel this is a bigger deal now?
I think it took about 6 months of this constant and seeing her as well, not with their clothes. They were kind of she was wearing more baggier. We were going out for more walks and the food, because we obviously in COVID, you all sat down together, and suddenly she didn't want to, or I'm going to eat in my bedroom. And then there was as well, when she'd eaten with us, she'd go disappear for various periods of time straight away, and you kind of think, unfortunately I did follow her, and she was being sick, so that was kind of like, oh my god, what's going on here? And I think you want to I was in denial, because you think, oh, it's just a one-off, but then you realize that there's something not right at all.
And presumably at that point you'd followed her, you realised that after meals, she was then making herself sick. There's a point at which you have to decide, do I have to introduce confrontation here? How do I approach this? What did you decide was the right course of action for you then?
Well, it was just the friendly mum chats, like, oh, everything all right? He's, struggling, and are we not cooking the right stuff? Is there anything else you fancy? And because she liked most foods, so as yourself that the ones they don't like. So it's kind of like trying to tailor everything to her, and she improved for a little while, because I think she knew I was onto her, but then it all slipped back again, because we were then let out, as they were saying, and I was back to work. I was back at work, so I didn't have you didn't have that control, and then it sort of, and it I don't know what happens after that. You kind of lose it again, but it's a really weird situation that you're in, because because she was older, you think, well, she's living her life, I have to live mine. So it was very difficult diagnosing exactly the point.
Yeah, and there's certainly different intricacies, I think, for a parent of an older child as opposed to the kind of child that, blackmail is a strong word, but when your child is 8, 9, 10, or even 13, 14, you can introduce kind of conversations around, if you don't do this, there'll be no Netflix, there'll be no seeing the boyfriend, there'll be no, but you're dealing with a much older child. And so in a way, you want to allow that young adult to have autonomy over their recovery and decision to get well, while at the same time being absolutely petrified that if this continues, it can only end one way.
Yeah, and then the exercise started. She was then going out for runs, not walks, it was running. And it went from once a day then to twice a day. And you're just like, okay, you're not seem to be eating, and you say to her, oh, I've done jacket potatoes today, just something. Oh, no, I'm fine. And you're like, well, you need that if you're running, but the running then overtook and the exercise, and it's just, then it just took hold. Don't ask me, I can't even remember how it took hold, but it did. And again, being an older child, she was an adult, you can't do anything, but obviously I needed help, and I didn't know where to go. And that's the point that you begin to think, we do need help with her. And it was causing conflict in the family as well, because meal times were then just got to a point where we were like, what are we going to do about all of this? So
it's a real conflict zone, isn't it, for anybody that's in the room? And that's true of whether you've got a kind of a spouse or a partner, but equally other siblings. It's really quite stressful for them. And just even the compromise on a family group of saying, well, actually, no, we can't go to that, I don't know, gathering or social occasion that we've normally gone every year because we know we're going to have to make excuses for, or, this is going to be too distressing for our child to attend. There must have been so many times where you felt your life was being compromised as well as hers.
Oh yeah, we'd go out for family dinners, to restaurants for occasions when we were allowed to, and she wouldn't eat. They'd do her a plain chicken with salads because we'd pre-ordered and I'd asked them, and then she wouldn't eat it. And you can see the look on the restaurant staff's faces as if, God, what's wrong with this? And then as soon as we got up or everybody had finished and they started clearing away, I was always the one in the background going up to the staff going, I'm really sorry, but we think she's got an eating disorder. So I'm apologising for her because the food was lovely, but you're almost then like back to when they're a little child, when they don't eat because they've got something, but she's a grown and she just didn't eat it. I mean, it became a joke that the dog would end up with more nice chicken for dinner for his tea rather than because it's but it became more or less, and it began to put a stress on family events going out because we all knew she wouldn't eat it. She wanted to be there, but she wouldn't eat it. So, and have an elderly parents that didn't understand because they're from a generation where you ate everything, there was conflict there.
Yeah, of course, that kind of multi-generational thing, and
Yeah,
having, whereas had you have been saying to your elder parents, her grandparents, she's got a broken leg, or she's
yeah,
got this rash, this illness that will need to heal with medication, they'd be very understanding about this. But I think it still remains the case that as much as mental health is widely talked about, something like food behaviours is still really challenging for someone much older and without prior knowledge and experience to understand.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I literally had to sit both my parents down and my sister and say, look, this is what we're dealing. And they were like, well, we knew it was bad, but we didn't realise it was this bad. And I said, well, we're trying to keep it not from everybody, but we were trying, hoping that with her seeing how her grandparents were, that they would, she'd kind of see it. But no, it had taken hold by then. At that point, she was getting towards her worst.
So it's interesting that you say, we weren't necessarily trying to hide it, but did you feel a sense of shame, stigma, any embarrassment? Did you feel any of that as a family? Because again, let's go back to the broken leg. You probably would have said to a friend, my daughter's got a broken leg. Did you feel that you couldn't sort of universally across your friendship group mention what your daughter was going through in the same way?
I think because I didn't understand it, I didn't have a concept of it. I didn't really think to share it with people. And also, I suppose, in a way, you put a barrier up because you're then thinking, why is this happening? What did I do as a parent for this to happen? But now I know, looking back, it's a mental issue, like you said, but also it's control for her. There was things in her life she couldn't control, so that's the one thing she could control. And I suppose I was trying to please everybody and hope that we would get through it and not have to worry. But obviously that just got to the stage where we had to just open up about it, and it was a relief in the end. It was a real relief to share it with everybody that what they thought was
Yeah.
actually true. So in the end, it was a real relief.
Mm. So tell me about when you actually did reach out. You said, "Come on, Sharon, this can't carry on. I've got to reach out to a professional sense of support." How did you go about that?
Well, to be honest, the first thing I did was I obviously Googled people, eating disorders organisations, and I did go to a couple of the big one in particular big organisation. And again, it was just like, oh, there's loads of stuff online, you have to read about it. And I was like, well, I want to talk to somebody because I don't know what to do. And then I went, found somebody else. And again, it was just all online. And I just couldn't relate to them because they weren't relating to me. They weren't like, I understand, I'll help you. And then I found you guys. And it was just, it was, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here, but I found you and I found the podcast, which I found really, really helpful because suddenly you were talking about all what I had in my head that I didn't know what to deal with. So if I had at certain points, I could think, oh, I wonder if there's a podcast or there's a video and I reached out to you guys and you really were like, yeah, I get it. And I was like, oh, thank God for that.
Sometimes it is just somebody meeting you where you are, isn't it? Just really feeling you're being heard and not as if someone's just going to power a kind of cue card down the phone to you.
Yeah, and not give me a leaflet, it was just like, yeah, I get it. I absolutely get what you're going through because at this point it was serious. She was up at 3:30 a.m. walking the streets. Then she'd go to work and then she would come home, not eat, and then she'd be out again for hours on end. So you're just kind of like her physical well-being was then at harm because with respect, there are people around that aren't very kind, and she was vulnerable. She was so underway, and I knew when she was at a low point because she'd post on social media. She'd put, waiting for everybody to go, oh, you look great. And I was horrified because I just and somebody said, well, you don't put anything. Well, no, because I know what's going on and it's not and I wanted to shout at a few people and go, do you think that looks right? So, it's a lot of emotions for a parent, a lot of emotions. So, it was very difficult. And we had to make some really harsh choices as her next of kin. I mean, we took her car keys. We actually stopped cooking and told her she had to cook for herself and she had her own drawer for food. And that was a godsend because it took pressure off of us because whatever was in there was what she would eat. So
you were trying to make her accountable, have a kind of level of responsibility for looking after herself. And actually, I think, with all the work that we do as an organisation, when we talk to parents, there's a real shift when a parent is able, or it might be a spouse or partner, when they're able to say, actually, I can't do this. You can't keep bringing me down like this. It's too much for me to support you in this way. You're going to have to step forward and take some responsibility yourself. There's a huge shift in how that feels for you as the person who until that point has felt utterly helpless, literally like you are sitting on the sidelines waiting for them to pass away. And there is nothing more frightening than that.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing. It was just kind of, I think me and her stepdad are just like, well, we've done everything. If this is control, which I read about, then you take control. There's your drawer. You put all your food in that you want to eat. You cook the food you want to eat. We'll eat ourselves. It's always there for you, but this is now your responsibility. You want control. Well, there you go. And it's tough love. It was awful. Absolutely awful.
We hear that expression so many times of people saying about tough love, and it's so much harder, I think, adult to adult. So whether that's as a partner of somebody who is still going to crawl into bed with them that night, or whether it's in your situation where you'd already formed an adult mother-daughter relationship. So all of a sudden, how are you going to shift that power balance now? Are you going to scream and shout like she was 5 years old and tell her off for not sitting in a high chair and eating? Or do you try and maintain that adult relationship that you've always longed for with your daughter? But actually, you can see that if you're complicit in her continuing as she is, it's not going to end well for anyone.
No, and I think, it became apparent that she had a lot of aggression towards me. I was the bearer of all her aggression. And you know, it's awful. We do laugh about it now, but in a way, it was a sense of relief for me, because I then wasn't she had to take responsibility, and I didn't have that pressure. It's an awful thing to say, but it is a relief, because now
Yes.
you've handed it back to her, and she wants control. Well, there you go. You've got it now. You control. Yeah, yeah.
Now, I know the story briefly from conversations you and I've had, but tell me what it was that, if you like, triggered the start of a recovery journey. And you know, when we talk about recovery journey, we know that just like falling into an eating disorder, in the same way, recovery isn't linear, and it has its bumps in the road. But where do you pinpoint her recognition that this had to change?
Oh, it was just a bizarre Sunday. Her stepsister was coming over for dinner. She'd been in bed for about a month on and off because of trying to get her antidepressants sorted, because she needed to eat, but she felt sick, so it was constantly battling that. And then I just happened to say to her this particular, oh, her stepsister's coming over. It'd be nice if you could just sit with whatever you want to eat. There was no pressure. She had to eat that we could sit as a four, because we hadn't done that for a long time. And I just thought it'd be really nice. We talked about it. I thought everything was fine. I said we'd be eating about 6. She came down, and unbeknown to me, she hadn't eaten all day or drunk, because she was worried about her, even though we'd had the call. And she collapsed in the kitchen. Luckily, her stepdad caught her. I was hysterical. We put her. She came to, and she suddenly went, "Why am I in this room?" And we went, "Well, because of this." And then all of a sudden, she sat down and ate. She just ate a meal, which three of us were just like, "Oh my God." And nobody, we sat in silence because nobody knew what to do. And it was the next day I took her to the surgery. We ended up in hospital. They didn't keep her in. And then from then on, she listened. She was more listening. Bizarrely, my car got hit, and I found her a counsellor, a private one. She was under the NHS, but that's a whole story. And she found somebody that listened to her, and she related. She didn't want to go and see her. She was so against it that I took her, but that's the turning point for us. Don't know. So I think it took that. She was at her lowest.
And I mean, I know we could navigate the full ups and downs of that story, and I'm sure at some time in the future we may well do that. But tell me in summary how you feel she is today, because I was really delighted that we had a conversation the other day, and you were saying about her kind of moving on from a relationship perspective, wanting to buy her own home and all those kind of things. How does the world look to both you and to her right now?
We are back on track as a mother-daughter. We used to love going for coffees, and now we do that. She's got a full-time job. She's got a new partner of over nearly a year. They're looking to move together. She's 15 months in, and some days she gets overwhelmed, but she's just recently been to a friend's wedding, and she ate the meal with strangers, which she wouldn't have done before. And you know, she talks about it. She actually talks to me about things when sometimes she'll see a photo and she goes, "Mum, you know, I'm sorry for what I did." And I said, "Don't be sorry. We just have to build from it. You know, we can't live in the past." And she doesn't have many of the photos, but again, social media, sometimes they pop up. But she's in such a great, and for me, it's great. And I just feel so relieved that I've got her back. I mean, it was 2 years of real hardship, and you know, with everything, but it's great. It's so good to see her off there now. You know, it's taken, you know, we've had a blip, and she's, you know, she's still got a way to go. we still have, there'll be things come up and she'll talk to me, but she talks. She'll work it out now instead of worrying about it. We'll talk about stuff. So yeah, it's brilliant.
And I think what's so good about where you're at now is with recovery, it's an upward trajectory where, because one good thing is happening, then it gives way to other good things. There's that kind of initial letting go of, if I stop trying to let the eating disorder control my world, what might happen, what could happen, what potential is there? What she's discovered now is she gets a potential to have a relationship with someone she likes.
Yeah.
She gets to have a career that she enjoys. She gets to have the thought of having an independent home. Hopefully, as she progresses through that recovery pathway, she'll be reminded of all the things she's gained by letting go of the eating disorder. Whereas when you stay in that mind funk where you refuse to get recovered, where you refuse to accept that you've got to change, nothing is changing. And so life is pretty depressing. So why would you want to change? Because you can't believe anything's going to get better.
And also she's now got the tools with her having the help, that if there's a situation, she knows how to deal with it, and she doesn't have to deal with it alone. She can deal with it with us and her own mechanisms. She knows some of the words to use when she's in a situation, because there are trigger words that she's used that help her. They're not for everybody, but at the end of the day, she knows, and she's in such a good place. And I think from a parent, you've always got it in the back of your mind, is she going to go back? But I know she's not. And I just know that we're going to have days, but we'll deal with them. And if she is going to have anything, she'll come and talk. And she knows where to go to talk to people now as well, which has been the biggest thing.
Well, Sharon, I just want to wrap up by saying one of the things that it really sort of fills my heart was, in part, why we're chatting today is because you've really decided you want to be a bigger part of this community, haven't you?
And yeah, absolutely.
You're really keen to make sure that your experiences, your insight and your empathy can help other people, with you being a parent befriender.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I might not have the answers, but I might have been through it, or it's just somebody to talk to, just have a coffee, that you just get away from it, because I didn't have that. Your friend, I've got some very, very dear friends, but they sometimes don't get it there. Whereas, just it might just be the simplest thing that somebody might say, and you go, oh, well, actually, just do this. And they think, oh, it's okay. Yeah, it is okay.
And even then, even if it's not advice, even if it's not knowing what to say, it's just the fact that someone's sitting across the table from you or going for a walk with you and gets it. As you said before, It was, the thing that you got out of calling Wednesday's Child wasn't that we wanted to, fill your hand with lots of leaflets and tell you to look at loads of things on. It was just about listening, hearing, and understanding what you're going through. And I think if you, given your situation and what you can bring to the party, I think that's so invaluable. It really, really is. So, we're delighted that you're happy to be part of our community.
Oh yeah. And time is, you can give all the money in the world, but time is precious. And if you can give somebody that little bit of time, that means more than anything. And that's what, I want to do and going forward. And I'm sure Emma at some point will join us, but at the moment we're there, but we're not there.
That's lovely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Sharon. You've been listening to the latest podcast from Wednesday's Child. Please do keep listening, and you will hear the insights, the experiences, and those invaluable pieces of advice that people like Sharon are able to impart on this podcast, because the most important thing we can do is remember that we aren't alone, and that yes, this is one heck of a challenge, and it's not always possible to reach out in the direction you might want to, whether that's through statutory healthcare, or you may not have another member of the family or a wide enough friendship group that you can talk to. But just by sticking your ear pods in and listening to Sharon talk about what she's been through, suddenly you'll be reminded, just as she was when she was listening to our podcast episodes, 4 or 5 years ago now, these are really sort of just helpful little nuggets that remind you, A, recovery is possible for the person going through it, and B, that you as the person who cares and loves for someone, you're not alone, you're not going crazy, and that there is a path beyond this. So thanks again for listening to the podcast of Wednesday's Child, and we will be back with another episode very soon.